Hello, Tuesday. Last night, just before I went to beddy buys, there was an interesting Twitter conversation between Isabella Kaminska of the Financial Times Alphaville and Cullen Roche of Prague Cap. Cullen's not quite right. He could be bordering on a classic example of Homo economicus. He's not very sensitive to some things and is more attuned to calculating things. Isabella's been working on a project now, as she said earlier in this Twitter conversation with Cullen, that she's been working on a thing and she's been putting it out in the Financial Times Alphaville for about a year now. Now that is a big project for people like her working on Alphaville, to have a long-range project. They have lots of, this is interesting, coming up news and talking about news, but the news always changes. But to have a solid concept that she's developing is a different thing, an interesting thing. I've touched on it 2 or 3 times from different angles, because to my mind, it's almost like banking. It's one of these things that's probably in the end going to work out to be obvious, but getting towards it being obvious takes an awful lot of don't understand, an MMT and things like that. And this is where I think this conversation came from. Isabella, Izzy, we'll call her from here on in. Izzy has taken up on Prague Cap's line on MMT and especially sectoral balances that now Goldman Sachs has taken up so much, and approves of Cullen's move to MR, monetary realism, as opposed to modern monetary theory. Cullen's monetary realism, where he'd put more realism into the theory. And she's taken up on that, and they do interact on the Twitter feed a reasonable amount, but nothing like this. And what this is Cullen taking an interest in what Izzy wrote, Izzy being absolutely delighted because it's a very tricky problem. She's really had a terrible kicking on the comment section for nearly a year on her presentation of this idea, because nobody seemed to like it. But today's presentation, the comment, which was yesterday's comment section, was much more approving. Izzy's getting approval of her theory, and I'm sure she wanted to give Cullen something for her taking so much from initially MMT and then monetary realism. So Izzy was really excited when Cullen shows an interest, but Cullen, Homo economicus, was pretty insensitive at times. Okay, so this conversation on Twitter has been going on quite a bit before we get this one that I've clipped and put up in the presentation. But this is more for us as an introduction again to Izzy's overall concept, which I think I can get to now better via this Twitter conversation than I've been able to in the past via the snips I've done from FT Alphaville that Izzy's put up. Okay, right, yeah, I think that's a good enough introduction. So Cullen says, I used to watch the Jetsons every day. Now, the Jetsons is a mystery to me, but Izzy knows about it, and the way they talk about it, I can get the idea now what's going on. I thought it was overrated. I'm more of a Voltron guy. Now, Voltron I don't know about either, but I think it's comparing television shows, and he's saying Voltron was better than the Jetsons in a futuristic science fiction sort of program way, which is again showing great insensitivity by Cullen there, which he rarely, if ever, shows in his comment section, but does on Twitter. He often just puts his foot straight into it, showing that he's not wrong, but he's not quite right. Anyway, Isabella, as we can see, you read Twitter upwards. In case you're not a Twitterer, you don't read it from the top downwards, you read it from the bottom upwards, because that's the way the Twitters come in, the tweets come in. Jetsons is based on the economics behind a leisure society. George Jetson only works an 8-hour week. Now, for me, it doesn't matter what the Jetsons are. I'm getting the idea that Jetson, only Mr. Jetson in the scientific program, presumably, only works an 8-hour week, and is basically paid to press a button, i.e. labour, that's the way you spell labour in English, is just a monetary distribution mechanism. Right, now we've touched on this in the past here on OTP, where we have recognised that work is the way that money is distributed. But here in the future we're moving on to a similar thing, but it has changed. Labour is just a monetary distribution mechanism, and we'll come to more fine-tuning on that later. Anyway, none of this theory is new. What is new-ish is linking it to the root cause of the financial crisis. Now, this is what Izzy's been doing over the last year, and there'll be the link to the FT Alphaville, which I think you can go to and read, even if you haven't got a subscription to FT. But I'll say don't bother, unless it's very difficult. It's basically you'll get lost there. But if that's a worm on a line and that's what you like, is a bit of a challenge, go to Izzy's, but realise that it's number 9 of 9 that she's put up, and she's refining all the time. But it's still, even for me, who've read them all and all the comments that go with them, it's still, there are a couple of bits of the concept that I just don't understand. About the return to capital, etc. So what is newish is linking it to the root cause of the financial crisis. So this isn't just theory, this is, could this be what actually caused the financial crisis? Initially, the tech bubble and bust, and then the housing bubble and bust, and then what we have now. Right, it goes on. So Cullen comes back to Izzy, is what's your fix to this problem? Is there one? Now, another link below is to Cullen, who's written an article based on this. All during, these people are multitasking. Twitter is just probably something on their iPhone that's on their desk, and they're just doing things at the same time. And Cullen's written an article, thinking he's written it before Izzy's written hers, which I'll tell you about as well. What's your fix to this problem? Is there one? Now, this is Cullen being sensitive, because this is a much better way to talk to somebody like Izzy. Cullen does not think it's a problem. At this stage, and probably still, Cullen says buggy whips. Buggy whips as in, there's always been technology, we've always moved on, and it's always been better for us in the long run. iNet comes in, because I follow iNet on Twitter. When is waste good waste? Which I thought it fitted in reasonably well with this conversation, but we'll move past it. So Izzy comes back to Cullen with, it's not a problem, it's evolution. You can't reverse technology, obviously. In fact, we now risk everything by restricting technology. Now, this isn't just a pie-in-the-sky, airy-fairy sort of just throw it out there comment. This is a worked-out result or resultant of her overall theory that she's been working on. We risk everything by restricting technology. That is a little shorthand for something that's really a very big theory that she has. Cullen comes back to Izzy with, but surely you think the rising unemployment is problematic, right? So, because of MMT and having unemployment rammed down his throat, Cullen is sensitive to unemployment. Izzy comes back with, not if it's leisure related. you have to start thinking in a job guarantee sense like George Jetson. Now, this is starting to get from where we are now to where we'll have to get to if we want to work this problem through. And some things that we've touched on here before, but Izzy's way into it, I think, is a much easier way in to work out how we can distribute money, be it via work, even if that work is doing nothing in the future, rather than any ways that I've tried in the past. Although understanding Izzy's theory, as I say, is as tricky as coming to banking or MMT. It takes an awful lot to get into it. Right, so we go on. Izzy trying to explain things in Twitter because she knocked out a Tumblr to Cullen. Tumblr's just another way of writing a blog. She's got a blog on Tumblr, so she was obviously doing it while she was eating. So she's knocked out a Tumblr blog for Cullen as well, which I'll reference. So we've got the three references. Izzy's main, let's call it number 9, on her theory, FT Alphaville. We've got, I'll put the Tumblr next because she actually wrote it before Cullen wrote his. I don't know that even Cullen's read the Tumblr. He might have gone past that. And then Cullen's reply to Izzy's comments on Twitter. So there's the three of them. But accepting that Izzy wrote the Tumblr very quickly earlier on than these Twitters came through. That precious resources are being wasted by non-redeemed goods, either spread wealth at zero profit or subsidise workers. Now, forget the first bit because it's part of the terrific complications of this. Either spread wealth at zero profit or subsidise workers. Again, spreading wealth at zero profit is part of it, so just go to subsidise workers. But where does the money come from? That's all part of Izzy's theory as well. Second option is basically what's been going on in Japan. She's just come back from Japan and got back to Switzerland, and somebody had broken into her apartment and stolen her mother's gold jewellery, her dead mother's gold jewellery. Alternative, create illusory work like bureaucracy. This is what's going on in Japan. This is why the unemployment rate is low in Japan, is because they just do make work. That's no good, you say. Wendy's out there still working on what wealth is. I won't go into, but we've discussed it enough about money and wealth and things to know that they are not established concepts. And I think in this way of thinking, the idea of money is going to change more than the idea of wealth, but the idea of wealth is going to change as well. But accepting that we don't really have an established meaning for wealth. So what we've got now is an options to ways to distribute money, because industry has become so efficient and there are so many people that can go in and press a button and machines and robots to work and make things for us. There's so much potential leisure to be done. This is Keynes' point when he doesn't matter what people are working on, digging holes as long as it's working. Now, this is again a problem with Keynes, that people don't understand Keynes. They think Keynes was only for spending lots of money by government, but don't understand that that's part of a theory where you save lots of money as a government when the good times are in and you spend it when they're bad, and you just breathe like that. But that was one theory of Keynes's, who had thousands. And economics was Keynes's part-time work. When you're a genius type, you do genius things. The work is just a monetary transmission mechanism. Now, this is where we get to something that I can put in here. The work is just a monetary transmission mechanism. To keep society together, everybody must have spending money. You can't have the people on the streets dying because they haven't got money. So you've got to get money to them somehow. So it'll either be the Japanese make work, because there's not enough work to go around. The work is just a monetary transmission mechanism, a la Japan. But what has happened in Japan, as we now know, with the huge government debt there, they have done all this make work, they've spread work around, but what it has done in a way, with the government debt being so huge, is made a mockery of money. But this is all part of this theory that money has been a mockery anyway. It's always been a mockery. It's only tokens, but this will then show it to be tokens. But as long as people can see this first and know what's being done with money, as in it's just being spread round to keep society together, then money will keep being valuable. It'll keep its credibility because people will understand what it's doing out there. At the moment, it pretends to do things, and it's in an intermediate stage between one thing and another thing. But in Japan, it's been rendered almost meaningless by the way it has just been distributed. But the world is going to have to understand that that's going to happen all over the world. All the world is going to go Japanese, and money is going to move from being just tokens so people can transact to being tokens so people can transact, so they can live, so society can keep together. What we've got now, they're tokens so people can transact, so capitalism can stay together, but it's going to be tokens so people can transact, so society stays together. But people are going to have to understand this to accept it, because they're struggling now on the other one, which is tokens for transactions for capitalism. They're struggling with that. They're going to have to be moved off that to the ultimate one, which is purely to keep society together. So in the third and last here, it looks pretty much the same, but it's the third. Is it? Hang on. No, I've done them all. Have I? Yep, I think I've done them all. If I haven't, monetary transmission. Yeah, I've done the 3, because this goes on Twitter. But I've done quite enough there to introduce you to Izzy's big project, which is being accepted more and more as MMT went on to be developed by Cullen to be MR, has being accepted more and more by people like Goldman Sachs now, who Jan Hatzius, who I put the video up for Paul yesterday, just puts it in he's the chief global economist for Goldman, just puts it straight there in his notes, as they call them, for the investors. Things are sorting themselves out in a very complicated way. We're moving quickly, and everyone can be involved in this because it gives reasons for so many things. Izzy can see it, that linked with Cullen's MR, monetary realism, and her idea, it gives us reasons for the way things have happened in the past, and a very, very big insight into how they will have to develop in the future, I think, anyway. But if you think you're going to have to keep up with this one time, this is the way in. FT article that Izzy wrote that you won't understand, but you can try her Tumblr post, which is easier to understand, but some concepts will be too tricky, and Cullen's reply to get the balance of a conversation going. But it's heavy dude stuff, but I believe it's by far the most interesting lines of economic type thought that I've come across since I've started with this. Bye.